Nothing worse when someone is so woke and they're on this therapy journey and they expect you to be right there with them.
No. We all right?
When Kim Kardashian speaks, the world pays attention. And when she chooses to break her silence about betrayal in Hollywood, it doesn't take long for the industry to take notice. Known for her calculated approach to fame and business, Kim has built her empire by staying above petty disputes and rarely diving into public drama. But that image shifted during a recent podcast appearance that left even seasoned Hollywood insiders stunned. In an unusually candid moment, Kim opened up about an experience that cut deep. She described being manipulated, pushed aside, and excluded from a major project by someone she once trusted as a collaborator. She didn't mention a name outright, but the details she dropped, the timing, the context, the relationships involved, were enough for listeners to put the pieces together. Within hours, social media was ablaze, and one name dominated the speculation: Blakelively. What started as a conversation about female empowerment and the struggles women face in the entertainment world quickly transformed into something far more explosive. For many, it was the most direct and damning suggestion yet of Blake's rumored reputation for behind-the-scenes control. And with Kim Kardashian pulling back the curtain, the whispers could no longer be ignored.
My hacking skills.
Nice.
Yeah. I got into the voicemail thing, and it was on my birthday.
Kim Kardashian recently appeared on a high-profile podcast exploring the delicate balance of influence and integrity. At first, the conversation felt familiar, lighthearted stories about branding, motherhood, and the daily challenge of staying authentic in a culture obsessed with perfection. But the tone shifted when the host asked about navigating difficult collaborations. Kim's demeanor grew more serious, and what she revealed caught listeners off guard. She spoke of a chapter in her career that left her blindsided. A moment when she believed she was working side by side with another woman in Hollywood, building something powerful together, only to later discover she had been carefully pushed out of the picture. Kim never mentioned a name, but the details were clear enough to set off speculation. She described a luxury fashion campaign, one that had started with shared ideas, creative synergy, and public smiles. Then, suddenly, her content vanished. Her involvement dissolved without warning. Worse, she didn't learn the truth from the brand, but from someone on her own team. For Kim, it wasn't about losing the project, it was about the betrayal. The calculated nature of the move marked a turning point, reshaping the way she views trust and loyalty in an industry built on appearances.
It's like, wow.
Break up. Slow room.
Blake, look at him for Michael Kors.
The campaign Kim alluded to has since been widely identified as a 2021 luxury fashion rollout from a major European house. At its conception, the project was marketed as a collaboration between two influential women from vastly different worlds, one embodying Hollywood glamour, the other symbolizing cultural dominance in the modern era. It was designed to celebrate unity, influence, and diversity, and Kim Kardashian was positioned as its original centerpiece. She signed on early, completed her shoots, and even appeared in the campaign's first teasers. For months, everything suggested the collaboration would spotlight her unique role in shaping culture. But as the launch drew closer, her visibility began to shrink. Quietly, and almost without explanation, Kim's presence was dialed down while another figure's involvement steadily grew. That figure was Blake Lively. What began as a secondary role quickly shifted. Insiders revealed Blake's team negotiated aggressively, securing editorial control, creative direction, and high-profile media exclusives. Within days, Kim's segments were removed from the final cut, her footage shelved, and her name scrubbed from press releases. Publicly, there was no drama, just silence. But those behind the scenes knew what happened. And now, thanks to Kim's carefully chosen words, the story is out, fueling a new wave of scrutiny around Blake's reputation for quiet maneuvering.
Wear feather numbers with cashmere sweatshirts at whatever time it is.
And you do all of your own styling.
And the best t-shirts from Skims, like when I'm telling you, they're thick enough.
Kim's revelation didn't exist in a vacuum. Within days of her podcast appearance, murmurs spread across the industry, with insiders, some on record, most off, hinting that this wasn't the first time Blake Lively had allegedly maneuvered behind the scenes to take control of a project. A stylist who worked on the campaign recalled how everything shifted once Blake's team secured more influence. What had started as a balanced collaboration quickly turned competitive. Co-stars who were meant to share the spotlight became little more than props. Those who didn't fully align with Blake's vision found themselves quietly phased out. One creative director described the atmosphere as a complete transformation. The initial goal, a celebration of dual power and influence, was slowly reshaped into a showcase for one individual's brand. There were no public clashes or explosive demands, just a trail of subtle moves, carefully revised emails, harmless editing notes, and a final cut that erased Kim entirely, leaving Blake at center stage. For many, this marked the first time Kim herself had experienced the quiet but calculated exclusion that others, names like Zendaya, Anne Hathaway, and Rachel Zegler, had long been rumored to endure. The difference? Unlike them, Kim refused to stay silent.
The last time you went somewhere where someone didn't know who you were?
You know what? In Japan, it's like that. You know, everyone's really respectful, even if they might recognize you.
Kim's decision not to address the situation immediately wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of discipline. For years, she had mastered the art of restraint, refusing to fuel gossip or indulge in petty feuds. She believed that dignity, composure, and consistency would ultimately speak louder than retaliation. Remaining silent, she thought, was a way of preserving integrity in an industry addicted to drama, but time changed her perspective. As Kim continued to rise in influence, she began to notice a troubling pattern. The very tactics used against her were being deployed against other women. Younger women, rising stars, women of color. For them, the stakes were even higher, the opportunities fewer, the consequences harsher. What had once seemed like a one-off betrayal revealed itself as a repeated strategy, calculated moves designed to erase or diminish others for the benefit of one. Kim recognized that her silence, however noble it may have felt, was no longer neutral. By staying quiet, she risked enabling the very behavior she disapproved of. Watching others get sidelined, their contributions minimized or erased, forced her to reassess. This wasn't just industry politics, as many insiders shrugged it off. It was a deliberate method, a career blueprint built on subtle exclusion and quiet manipulation. When Kim finally chose to speak, it wasn't an act of revenge. It was a call for accountability. Her voice, carefully measured and respected, carried a gravity that gossip alone never could. By sharing her experience, she shattered the illusion that such maneuvers were harmless or acceptable. And in doing so, she gave permission for others to step forward too. What once lingered in whispers was now undeniable. The game was rigged, and it was time to call it out.
I am his home, and our girls are his home. And just like that 19-year-old boy, he races home.
Once Kim spoke, the domino effect was immediate. Suddenly, the whispers that had lingered for years turned into testimonies. Editors, stylists, creative directors, and former collaborators began to share what many had long suspected, that Blake Lively's reputation for effortless grace and solidarity was only part of the picture. Behind the polished image, they claimed, was a pattern of soft power and quiet maneuvering. Accounts surfaced of Blake requesting solo edits in features originally designed as group pieces. Co-branded shoots that once promised shared visibility would, by the time of release, transform into single-focus campaigns. Smaller talents found their contributions diminished, their credits erased, or their roles reduced after Blake's team stepped in with adjustments. It wasn't dramatic, never loud. The changes arrived in the form of subtle edits, careful negotiations, and PR directives that reshaped the narrative until Blake stood alone in the spotlight. What made these stories striking wasn't the anger. They weren't bitter outbursts. Instead, they carried the exhaustion of professionals who had been silent for too long, forced to play along with an illusion. One fashion editor summarized the sentiment in a single sentence: "She plays the game better than anyone." But the game always has casualties.
Taking you shopping with me ever again?
Yeah.
I was in the store just trying to buy a pillow.
I'm just very happy that when I entered this phase of my life,
Kim Kardashian's words didn't just go viral, they sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Within hours of her podcast appearance, the industry was buzzing. Other actresses began quietly signaling support, not through explosive statements, but through carefully crafted gestures. Zanaya posted a simple message on her feed: "Know your worth." Rachel Zegler liked a thread dissecting the timeline of the Blake Kim campaign, an action subtle but impossible to miss. Anne Hathaway, who years earlier had hinted at a manipulative co-star in a veiled interview, added her own cryptic contribution: "The masks always fall." The quiet solidarity was enough to change the current. PR teams took note. Executives, brands, and agencies began reevaluating their strategies. What once seemed like an untouchable reputation suddenly appeared fragile. A few campaigns with Blake quietly paused. Endorsement deals stalled in negotiation. Creative teams that had once centered her as the face of elegant Hollywood began exploring alternatives. In an industry that thrives on momentum, hesitation is deadly. And this time, the hesitation wasn't speculation, it was Kim Kardashian. Her voice carried receipts, credibility, and cultural weight that was impossible to dismiss. As the narrative shifted, Blake remained silent. Her team issued a vague statement about professionalism and supporting other women, but instead of diffusing the backlash, it ignited it further. Comment sections flooded with demands for clarity. Editorials, once glowing with praise, now described her as calculated and controlling. The shift in tone was swift and sharp. Behind the scenes, insiders began speaking more freely. Producers who had worked with Blake admitted that while she delivered star power, she also introduced challenges: contracts heavy with control clauses, requests for edit approval, quiet pressure to minimize the visibility of co-stars. None of it appeared outwardly malicious. It was subtle, strategic. But now, stripped of illusion, those strategies looked like patterns of exclusion. Kim's decision to speak was never about retaliation. It was about accountability. Her restraint over the years had been deliberate, but silence had allowed harmful dynamics to thrive. By breaking it, she not only protected herself, but also gave others the courage to step forward. Blake Lively, once celebrated as Hollywood's epitome of grace and relatability, now faces a very public unraveling, not because of one campaign, but because years of whispered stories have finally been believed. And Kim? She didn't burn bridges. She built boundaries. She reminded the industry that power without accountability is nothing but performance.